I got this call set up because I'll tell you the story behind it. I was on the internet and on LinkedIn and hearing all the things about back to the office, work from home, back to the office, work from home, and a huge debate. And it sort of started to drive me a little bit bananas because it's a binary. And in almost every single company that I work with, there's no such thing as back to the office or work from home. It's a mess of all kinds of things. And teams are mixed, and you don't see much unless you're on the factory floor where people are all in the same place at the same time. And I started thinking there's got to be more to the discussion than back to the office or work from home. And being in leadership and owning authentic edge leadership and really looking at how I try to foster healthier interactions in the workplace, I started thinking about this is so beyond just learning new technologies. This is beyond learning Zoom, all the things we did when the pandemic hit. What is it now? And if we're going to go and train or coach or work with people who are leading in this environment, what do they actually need from us? What do they need from us? And it can't be a million things. We need to gel it down. But what we're talking to them about now isn't sufficient. And so I went away and started to put together a resource, the 10 things that I thought I would contribute that people ought to know and be able to do, different practices they could have. We've got the idea of hosting anchor days in the office or remote with your team. I've got, team rituals that you can create, and how to change from an open door policy to having alignment conversations, which is one of my favorite topics. And I started putting this together thinking, I'll write a piece on this. I'll put this out as an article. And if you want this, by the way, if anyone wants this, all you've got to do is send me an email. Muddy will put the email in the chat, and send me an email and I'll send this to you. But I started doing it, and then I started thinking, well, I'm just recreating the wheel here. It's more of the same. It's still deeper than that. It's still more than that. And I wanted to hear from other people what they are seeing and what their leaders need, so that I'm not just coming from my own assumptions here in my work from home environment and my clients' environments that are all mixed. So I wanted to bring other people who are passionate about this topic, interested in this topic, together to chat about it today, and really talk about, what is the lay of the land that's out there right now? What are we seeing? What are the challenges that our leaders are facing? And what do they and their teams need most? What do we think? And then how can we support them? Now, I have ideas on this, and I have not only the 10 practices, but other things to share. But I want to hear what you have as your reality as well, and what you're seeing. So I'd love to make this interactive. And what we can do is even just jump in. Mehdi, are they able to unmute themselves?
Yes, people can unmute themselves. I did get a private message from chat that he's, or a private message in chat from Rob that he's working on lunch as well. So he said he'll do the best he can.
That he's working on what? I'm sorry.
He's having lunch while we're meeting.
Oh, got it. Yeah, no problem. No problem, Rob. Well, maybe between bites, you could just chime in here for a couple of minutes, Rob, and just tell us what your reality is. I was mentioning, what I'm seeing is a few places are 100% on site, like a factory floor. A few places are 100% remote, like in the tech industry. I'm seeing that now where they've actually hired people from all over the world and their teams are completely remote. But most often I'm seeing a hybrid, back to the office certain days of week, um, and also some mixed teams. Rob, what are you seeing? What's your reality?
Sorry, just took a big bite at the same time. So
Sorry.
I it's interesting because I am actually a vice president of commercial sales, client services, and marketing, and having led sales teams that were always remote over all these years. Uh, that part for me, I thought, was always fairly natural and easy. But it's interesting after the chaos of COVID, even as we've gotten back out into the field and started to work uh, in front of clients again, like we had always before, some of the representatives are, even 2 years later, it seems like to me, having difficulty getting into that cadence of being in front of clients and setting a pace that means that they can be successful. And my remote leaders are definitely having a challenge doing that, no matter how many lead measures we create and compelling scoreboards we create. And it's interesting that you said alignment conversations, because that's what we call them, right? We don't integrate anymore. We work hard to align our efforts to make sure that we are creating some level of commercial excellence. And yet so many of our team members still just can't get back up and on plane like they were 3 years ago or prior to 2020.
Well, and is your, I mean, I'm hearing a couple things below that, maybe some um, mental health, wellness kinds of things. I'm hearing some engagement kinds of things. When you say not back up to, does that mean productivity, like the number of calls or the number of successes they have? Does that mean how much they're talking to their teams? What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's more for the salespeople in particular, because all of my in-house staff is back in-house, right? So my marketing team is back in-house, my sales operations team is back in-house, my client services team is back in-house. So they're all in-house, and they all have supervisors who lay hands on them every day.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's the challenge for me that is uniquely different than it was 3 years ago, is to have a remote sales team like I've always had, that does have the success rates that we did prior to COVID. And
Yeah.
and for me, there's a ton of metrics to go into that in a coach's scoreboard, but for me, it can be reduced down to a few simple numbers, right? How many opportunities are they closing every month, and at what value, right? Is it big enough?
Yeah. Yeah. So really kind of in that area of let's be successful in making the sales, getting the numbers up. That's what you're tracking, and that's what you're not seeing coming back yet with that team.
For some,
For
yeah. So
some.
if I were
Okay,
to,
so it's a
if I,
mixture.
it is a mixture, and it's improving. We started to. I've come back to a company that I used to work at a few years ago, and I thought I was coming back to the culture that I had created in 2016, and to find that it wasn't so. There wasn't a culture or a cadence of accountability around performance. It was just do what you can do, and found that only 18% of the team was hitting plan. And we've got that up to 50% now, but even 50% still isn't good enough, because we'll miss plan for 2 years in a row now, which I've never done before, by $4 million.
Ouch.
And that hurts my feelings for them,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously for my organization. And it ripples through the organization when the economic engine underperforms.
Absolutely. I'll let you take a couple more bites and I'll chime in on that. And Scott, welcome. Glad you're here. Good to see you. Maybe you can chime in too and tell us what you're seeing in the clients that you're working with and in your organization. But we've been talking about, this whole idea of what's the reality now with a mixture of remote and not remote. I was talking to a leader just yesterday who has 6 people in the office, 2 people in remote locations across the world that have different time zones. And they also have a hybrid situation going on in the physical workplace that is here in Minnesota, where they can choose 2 days a week to work from home, and anyone can choose any days they want, and they can change it all the time. And so what she's finding is the engagement of team members talking to each other at all is very much decreased. People are hunkered down, getting their stuff done. And the only time that they're talking is when they actually happen to cross paths on a day that they happen to be in the office at the same time. And she's very concerned about her remote people that aren't having any of the hybrid. Her question to me was, how do I involve the remote people when we're doing connection activities on the hybrid days? It didn't even occur to her to work on engagement outside of the in the office piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was not her first thing.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that, before the pandemic, that there was just this understanding that, we all had to be together in order to, at least from management ownership, their perspective is that they needed butts and seats in order to get things accomplished. Now, whether that was the actual reason why they thought that, or it was a control thing, or whatever the case, or they wanted to substantiate, these big, beautiful buildings and their expensive leases. But the one thing that the pandemic certainly did was prove that there are a lot of, because of technology, because of the current state that we all live in, there's a lot of things that can be accomplished without that. And now that the toothpaste is out of the tube, I don't know if anyone on the call has tried to get toothpaste back into a toothpaste tube. It doesn't happen. It's impossible.
Well, now, obviously, Scott, you're working remote today.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
And you're back in-house, aren't you? You're at an organization.
I am at an organization, so I'm running a coaching. I'm still running Tonka Executive Coaching and doing that. But yeah, I'm working still in IT sales. I have in 30 some years. The company that I work for is based out of San Jose. About 7,000 employees, multi-billion-dollar organization.
So you probably have in common with what Rob was saying about, maybe you can give us your take on sales. Yeah. Do you think there's anything going on with hitting the mark when you have teams that are mixed, hybrid, remote, in person, all that?
Yeah. Really, in the sales world, you have 2 kind of distinct camps. whether that's at an OEM like I am, or at a partner like I used to be, is you have reps that have been there forever, have the relationships. They're more in protection mode. They have a gravy train of clients and money coming in, and so they're more about protecting status quo rather than trying new things. I mean, you take a look at like the big companies like Kodak and Sears and stuff that have once been Motorola, just top of their game. And they did a lot more in protection than they did in kind of disrupting themselves, trying something new, because inevitably someone else will disrupt you if you don't do it yourself. And then the other camp that's in most sales organizations is the people that are new to the organization or new to sales will try anything to be able, anything legal, right?
Are they hitting their targets though? How is that going?
How is what?
How is hitting the mark going? Are people, do you think productivity is down?
I think it's down for a couple of reasons. One is because I think the average, I think, was it Rob that you were just saying like 15% or 18% or whatever? I listen to a lot of podcasts, and that is actually a fairly industry average. It's like 20% or below of sales reps that actually consistently hit target. So how does an employer fix that? An employer fixes that by artificially inflating what the quota is, so that a sales rep can come in at 20, 30%, and it's actually closer to 100% what their actual expectation is to be able to do this.
That's so interesting that you are reading and seeing that that looks to be an industry pattern, Scott. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
I think
you bet.
maybe we can continue with this notion of, okay, so if we've got the productivity piece and we're concerned about not making the mark we were before, that may be a pattern, and maybe it's fixable within the organization or not. We don't know. But I think there's places to look and things to try. And I think it also has something to do with the people side of things. One of the things that I'm noticing that's happening with this resistance that people have to coming back to the office, that people are getting better boundaries and there's more of an acceptance around wellness and mental health, that people are disengaging even more. The disengagement statistics are their lowest in 17 years, and they're dismal. And so people are not feeling as connected to their work, like their work matters as much. They're struggling and dealing with a lot of things at home, a lot of things with family. And what I'm noticing is that leaders are squashed in the middle between the organization that says, here's the plan, here's what we're going to do, here's the numbers we're going to make, and then the workers who are pushing back to the office, who may be flexing their time in ways that leaders may or may not know, and the leaders in the middle actually not having a whole lot of strategies to communicate and even find out what people are dealing with. They're used to habits back in the office of, well, I can write someone up, I can put them on a performance review goal to increase their sales quota or their number, I can send them to a class. But they're feeling like, with this pushback, that a lot of leaders are saying to me, well, I can't tell them I don't believe them. I can't micromanage them either. I don't want to micromanage them. And so they're kind of in this middle place where they're stuck and they don't have many tools. And leadership classes and coaching and all the things haven't really given them these tools for interactions, healthy interactions with team, healthy interactions with themselves and others, around boundaries, around goal setting and shared goal setting. And I think people are just shying away and kind of letting it happen. Or either of you, and just throw in the chat if you're seeing anything like what I'm describing with the people who are supervising, that they may be frustrated that people are not making their numbers, but they're not exactly sure what to do about it.
Yeah, I think to your point, I'd rather just talk than put in the chat if that's okay.
Go ahead.
I think ultimately there's two ways of doing it: the carrot or the stick. And I've seen more at other organizations. I've seen more success with the carrot. Like an example, there's an organization that for every hour or every day, I think it's every day that they spend in office with team, they get a fractional more. So like a 0.25 or whatever of a day or an hour in PTO. So it's essentially, it's encouraging, rather than having we require you to be in here 2 days. If you come in here 2 days and meet the minimum requirement and you stay here throughout the course of the day, which is another thing that you see in people, they say you need to be in 2 days a week. There's no clarification on how long. So people literally go in, swipe their cards so that they can see that they're in, and 20 minutes later they swipe out. That really doesn't do anything other than just, yeah, waste everyone's
Yeah.
time. So I've seen more success with the carrot than the stick, but I don't know what anyone else has seen.
Any thoughts, Rob?
He looks like he's on mute.
Yeah. Might be between bites.
Well, he
Rob?
sent a message in the chat saying 100% working through 4DX and on the move back in the show.
Got it. Okay, cool. There's 4 different types of ways that we can attack problems like this. And the one that you were talking about, Scott, is actually a systems approach, this stick that you were talking about, or this idea of a carrot and stick and rewards and policies around how often we come in, how often we log in if we're remote. This is where things get in, where people are trying to figure out which policy we should do. Should we do the policy where we put the spyware on people's computers or not? Which makes me cringe a lot. Because then people feel monitored and people feel like Big Brother is watching. And that's the whole carrot and stick piece. You want to have something that's a policy and a guideline that promotes it. And like you say, the carrot might be working better right now, but it's a system answer. And so it can't work by itself, just like back to office and work from home can't work by itself. It's not that simple. We also need relationship pieces. The whole idea of having engagement with each other, right? And being connected. And I find it very interesting that we've had engagement surveys in most companies for over a decade, but we haven't really taken leadership steps, leadership training, leadership concepts to help people actually learn how do you raise engagement on your team. There's very little that's been done in that regard that's not system-centered. Or very much the opposite, a one-on-one coaching relationship, which is expensive. I mean, for a leader to work with a coach for 6 months to a year can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 on average. And so you can't really expect companies to be able to foot that bill for all the leaders, nor would you want to, because it would be very inefficient when there's so much of what's happening in coaching that could be taught to people in smaller bites. And then the coaching could be used to help them actually implement it, right? And it wouldn't have to be as long, as intensive as one-on-one. Some of the things that make distance or hybrid or all of these things tough is that we're dealing with humans and human relationships and emotions. And we're not dealing with robots, right? Even the whole concept of empowerment and people wanting to be responsible and have ownership for their own work day, which is a really high autonomy need for a lot of people these days. The productivity of people who don't get that or who don't feel they're getting that autonomy can dive, it can nosedive. So these are just a few things that make distance tough. Let's see if we can add anything else to the list. What else makes distance, working at a distance, not necessarily working from home necessarily, but if you are not in the same physical location as your team member and you're expected to supervise them, to motivate them, you're the leader, what are some of the challenges? What makes it tough when you're doing that from a distance? What do you think?
I think, I think a lot of people in that they're used to having the scene, the presence, and therefore that it's solidifies that I can give feedback, I can give encouragement. But when you don't see someone because you're not in the same physical area, and you can't really see whether they're online or what they're doing, you can't see their reaction. So the encouragement or guidance that you're giving them may or may not be hitting. And if it's not hitting, other than them verbalizing it, or if they turned on their camera so they could see, you don't really know. So it certainly makes it more difficult. So I don't know what the answer, quite honestly, is. I think ultimately these leaders, including these organizations, they need to get to a point, if they want people inside of an office or inside of a physical location, then somehow they need to help facilitate an environment or a culture that it's more enjoyable, more fun, more productive to be together in person. If that's what they want,
You're
than
hitting on
otherwise.
something that's really interesting. So one of the books that is actually, a lot of people don't know about it, but it's called The Remote Work Revolution. And I think it's fabulous. It cites studies from some Harvard researchers. And one of the things they say is similar to what you just said about making it enjoyable and making the ability to connect when we go into the office. They call it anchor days. And I have this, it's on my top 10 engaging practices for remote and hybrid leaders. So if you want this, just email me and I'll send it to you. But they call it anchor days. And the idea is, if we learn together as a team, we play together as a team, if we have engaging conversations as a team, if we have debates as a team, not just meeting and checking things off, how do we have things that intellectually stimulate us? How do we have things that put a goal? I'm thinking of Rob now, where some people are hitting the mark and some aren't. So my question to you, Rob, if you're still listening, is, if you've got some people hitting the mark and some people not hitting the mark, how could we come up with strategies where the whole team is actually helping each other versus everybody hitting their own individual quota? In some of these anchor days and other things I've read and heard about, is companies actually expecting the other team members to help each other raise the bar, whether it be through accountability partners, like the stick, or the regular expectation to meet with an accountability partner who may or may not be your boss, or a partner to get to a goal together where you're working on it together because maybe that person's style isn't solo. I don't know. Rob, how does that land for you?
Well, I actually came off mute, so I'm in a place. I moved away from the booth for a second just to have the opportunity to talk. It is interesting. We have tried many of the strategies that you've discussed here, and we have, like I said, we've been improving it. So maybe it's because we did those things. It's just that we as leaders sometimes don't have the patience for the level to improve at the pace that it needs to, or that it's happening naturally, or it's happening because we're doing these things, right? So last year we started to do exactly like you described. We called them accountability buddies, right? So accountability and buddies, put them together. We even built a contest around it, and it was a ton of fun. But you can't always be in a contest either, right? So when you get back to the daily grind, how do you keep that same level of engagement that you created in a unique event that continues then and becomes a part of their daily performance. And I'm listening to y'all, and I'm intrigued because I hear things that statistically I don't love, but I'm certainly experiencing it as truth, right? That we have sales teams that are underperforming in ways that we don't ever remember, right? I mean, if Scott's sharing with us that today, 20% is a high average of performance of the sales team, so companies are just raising the quota to get people closer to what the company really needs them to do, and that's been a strategy I think for a long time. But it's that 20% number that surprises me, because it used to be most business schools would teach you 33% is how most teams perform, right? Sales teams in particular, they'll be 33% at plan on average across the organization. So that if that's the truth of that number, then it represents a significant decline, not just for my corporation, but across, I guess, the world in reality. And then you shared that the engagement numbers you said are the percentages are down, I'm supposing.
All-time low for 17 years. Yeah.
People are actively even disengaged, right? If you think that there's essentially three groups: the group that is actively engaged and encouraging others, just naturally encouraging others to be engaged in the team, to raise the bar, as you were talking about. And then there's those people that are just engaged, not actively engaged, but engaged. I'm here, I'm doing my job. Yeah. And then there are those that are actively disengaged, right? They're not just not engaged, they're also encouraging other people to not be engaged, right? Why are we working so hard for the organization that doesn't, I'm just saying this, I don't think this is true of my organization, but it may even be true. There may be some people that are saying this. Why are we working so hard for an organization that doesn't really care about us as human beings?
Indeed, or they're whatever, right? Like that's another form of active disengagement, or whatever those choices might be. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my experience, this is at least resonating with me from the perspective of what my current experience is and how it differs from my past experience, which was never anything like this. And to have, I think we all, right, try to hire folks that are on their own, motivated to go out and do their job and do it well, and don't require, whether it be carrot or stick, much of that, because they've decided that the organization they've come to work for has a mission or a vision that inspires them and around which they can rally, right? And yet I don't know that that's so true anymore. I think, and it also may be a little bit valid, right? That, as you put it earlier, people are setting up boundaries and separating their life from their work in lots of ways, right? This is my self, and it's not all work, although 5-10 years ago, most of us would have easily said our work is our life is our work, and unfortunately we squeeze in the rest of it when we can.
Right.
And so how do we then, as leaders now at this point, recognizing that that's probably a significant and likely permanent shift in the work ethos of our teams, to accept it, engage it, and as much as we possibly can, keep everyone actively engaged, knowing that they're going to have increased boundaries around work and home life. Interesting though, too, I've seen statistics that say the more we work from home, the more we work, right? And
right. So we've got a couple of things going on, right? I'll pause for just a sec and just lay it out, because I think we've got Latasha, who just joined us, and I want to just bring her up to speed. We've been talking about the challenges when we have individuals or groups that are not in the same physical location. Any one team might have members in different places, or we're also in the office and at home and going back and forth. And we've talked about these system approaches as being not the only thing that's going to work. Just saying we're back to the office, mandating it isn't going to work. Mandates on certain number of things you have to do, whatever. People are pushing back because we've got this toggle back and forth, like you're saying, Rob, between needs at home, between our personal boundaries and our personal wellness and feeling like we have a right to that, and the expectations at work. And what we're seeing is we're watching the companies start to say, well, we're not seeing the productivity. And that's where we started this conversation, Rob, right? We're not seeing the productivity. We're not seeing the same sales number. Then Scott says, well, but maybe that's a pattern across what I'm seeing. Maybe everybody's down. And so then where does that put us? And I think for me, I think this fits with everything that I know about leadership. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's a gentleman named Ken Wilber who did a lot of research on integral theory. And Ken Wilber says that you need 4 approaches to actually being successful in any problem, in any environment, in any challenge you're trying to work on. And one of it is mindset and values. What do you value? How are you looking at it? What's your perspective on the problem? And what's happening for people, right? How are people wired, right? Then we have actions we can take, and not actions at the organizational level, but at the individual level. And when we have engagement that is so down, the actions aren't necessarily actions we would see. The action is actually inaction. People are opting out. They're opting out of meetings. They're turning off their camera. They're not attending meetings. Sometimes they're not saying they didn't meet a deadline. I have leaders talking to me every day about, well, he blew past the deadline. He didn't make the sales numbers, and I can't get a hold of him. And so there's different things happening for different people. Other people, like you're saying, Rob, are going overboard and doing so much all the time, and they're the stars. And what are the leaders doing? From what I'm seeing, they're saying, oh, that person's fine. And they make assumptions that person has fine wellness, mental health, family stuff. And actually, that person might have a ton going on. And if we aren't having engaging conversations with that person who's the highest performer, I'm watching them burn out. I'm watching them leave because they can't handle it anymore. And the leader never knew it was coming because there's not enough alignment going on. And it surprises the heck out of us, right? And I think there's a huge cost to the reality right now. There's a huge cost if we continue to approach this like it's just about back to the office, or it's just about quotas, or it's just about mental health. Like there's companies putting together wellness programs that are probably going to take a year to put together, and they're huge and they're going to cost tons of money. And then what? It's like we're building something, and will they come? I don't know. I'm concerned that we're not doing all 4, because number 4 that Ken Wilber talks about is culture. And both of you, Scott and Rob, you mentioned this earlier. Culture is important, right? And if we don't have a culture, that's a problem. And there's a lot of leaders who lead teams that are mixed, remote, hybrid, in, out, whatever. And they don't have the skills or knowledge in how to create the mini culture of the team. That's part of what I'm seeing as well. Latasha, I'm going to invite you, if you'd like to tell us what your reality is and what you're seeing. What caused you to come on today?
Thank you. I have to remain off camera, not
That's
dressed.
okay.
But, just some of what you were talking about, I think the assumption that somebody's doing well just because they're performing and not following up with that person. I'm kind of actually experiencing that myself, where things are being overlooked. no recognition for different things because it's kind of like that person already does that. And so then that person, like myself, they feel like, well, my gosh, what's the point of constantly performing at this high level if there's never any recognition, if it's just an expectation? But what's the expectation for those who aren't? Is it just, well, they're not doing it, and so
Yeah.
that's okay? And or when they do something, it's like, oh my gosh, there's all this recognition. It's like, just because they're doing this one thing. So I think a lot of managers are just, they're not focusing on meeting with people and actually asking how they're doing, or asking what they can help with, or ask them about how they feel about their performance.
Right. Right. I love what you're saying. I love it. I love it. I love it. It makes me think of a couple of things that I put on my top 10 engaging practices for remote and hybrid leaders. And if you want this, just email me and I'll send you a copy. But one of them is creating team rituals. And I was just working with a leader on Monday, and the team is a blend. So they have meetings that are part of the team in person and part are coming in remote. And they were having something similar to what you were talking about, this whole feeling of I'm not being recognized for what I'm doing well. And it's demotivating, and other people are sliding by and nothing's happening to them. And so I asked questions of this leader and found out, how is this team motivated? How are they motivated? Well, they're actually very motivated by the culture of the team, what others think of them, not just the boss, not just the organization. It's not like they want to win the award. That's not important to them. But they do care of what each other think, but they've been isolated for so long. So what we ended up doing is creating a team ritual, and she involved her team this week. I can't wait to hear how it went. Involve them in asking them, what would motivate you? If we had in our team weekly meeting a let's celebrate our wins part of the agenda, what would that look like? And I gave her examples to share. One of the companies here in town, one of the things they used to do is they actually used to make it a celebration and people could thank each other. It was called kudos. And they made it silly almost. They would sometimes give each other crowns and stuff. But a more serious team might simply have to share the thing that was their win for the week. And I know when I do this with my accountability partners, my business coach, other people who coach with me, I'm always surprised at what comes out of my mouth as to what I'm actually proud of and what I actually want to share for myself. And I'm very appreciative when others see something in me. And so this idea of how do we create a ritual that isn't the leader deciding, it's the team actually saying what would matter to them. And going beyond having donuts, going beyond having a round robin, I have to say this because the leader told me. Going beyond a typical recognition program where we're putting things in a box, a suggestion box for the name or whatnot. How do we start actually seeing each other every week? And maybe it's not about wins. Maybe it's about moments of appreciation or moments of challenge. Maybe the team would do a moment of challenge. Hey, I want to challenge you to step it up, dude. I'm not seeing it. What's going on over there? And do we have a ritual of that? It's an interesting conversation to create. It's being connected in a way that is putting it on the table, I call it. How do you put it on the table, and how do you learn to do that as a leader? And I think that's one of the challenges that I've been working on in my one-on-one coaching with leaders, in my leadership labs. I'm in the middle of a 60-day check-in challenge with a group of people, leaders, who are learning to do those one-on-one check-ins that you're talking about, Latosha. And it's amazing to me how I can talk with them and they have assumptions. The one gal on Tuesday said, well, you know, I can't do the check-ins until the end of the week because I'm not in the office till the end of the week. And I thought, so there's an assumption that if we're going to do a one-on-one, it's got to be in person. Isn't that interesting? And where did that assumption come from? And what would it look like to have an engaging one-on-one that's online or on the phone? What would that look like? And how do we figure that out and build that skill in her, even have it on her radar? I had another leader I talked to yesterday who I said, well, how often do you meet with your people? Once a month. And they have KPIs that they're hitting, but they go out by email, they go out on Teams, they have to log and report and do all the things, but they meet once a month. And I thought, wow. And she said, well, we've got a couple people on the team who don't like to be social at all. And I said, well, so it's about social or a team meeting with an agenda. She's like, yeah. I said, okay, let's talk about what a meeting would be in between. What's the meeting in the messy middle where we can have team rituals and we can have frank conversations and we can help each other with challenges, and what else could we do to engage each other and really get our intellectual stimulation going on, our creativity going on, and hold each other accountable as a team? Because here's the thing, back to what Scott was saying, I don't think that any organizational mandate's going to do this, not by itself. And I don't think any leader can do it by themselves either. Leaders have this assumption that they're supposed to hold people accountable. It's a 50-50 shot. Either people are scared of that or they're not. But what if leaders had the skill to have alignment conversations, to create rituals, to have one-on-ones and think about how frequently they should or could have them? What if leaders could learn all this stuff? And that's where I come to, Muddy, we're going to go to the next slide.
It also looks like, is it Latasha or Latosha?
Oh, it's Latasha.
Oh,
Latasha,
I got it wrong. I'm sorry. Thanks for correcting it.
It looks like your hand's been raised a little bit.
I just had a question because you indicated the 4 approaches, like mindset, values, actions, and culture. But what if the organization has like values or culture, but they're not exhibiting those values or culture? So how do you, as a leader to your team, reconcile that? Because if you're
Can
not,
you give me an example?
there was recently a layoff
Okay.
at the organization, and it was how it was done, in my opinion, it's just not how you treat people. Everyone in that organization received an email saying, we'll find out by the end of the day whether or not we are laid off or not. So it puts everybody in that panic mode.
Yes.
And so organizations not exhibiting the values that they stand by or the type of culture. So it's hard for a leader to when their employees are coming to them about those who are left.
Right. It feels like a false choice, doesn't it? It feels like, oh, I'm either gonna have to not toe the company line and make the company the bad guy, which feels yucky, because that's not a leader's job, or I've got to keep my mouth shut and just do what the company says and watch as my people suffer, and that's not in alignment with my values. Because it feels that way, it's a binary. It's a lie. You can play in the middle. I help people play in the middle all the time. So you asked me what I would say that you could do. I would say there's a couple of things you could play with. And depending on what you feel comfortable with, what it's safe to do, what it's courageous to do, what's in alignment with your values. One is coaching up. Coaching up is going to your boss and saying, I am uncomfortable with this. And this is why. I don't think it's an alignment. I don't think the company realizes that they're not in alignment. It's not about saying the organization's doing a bad thing. It's about saying, hey, I'm part of you. I'm loyal to you. And I think you're out of alignment here. And it may not change anything, but it may plant seeds for later. And it may create some conversation where there could be some discussion of leaders at your level, like you, who could come up with, well, what are the talking points we can say? So you're not doing it alone.
Okay, thank you.
You can also think about how you can say things from your heart to your people. I feel for you. I feel for you, and this is really, really hard. You don't have to say it's wrong. You can say, this is really, really hard. I wish it wasn't this way. I'll be right there with you when the message comes out. I'm here.
Thank you.
You bet. These are the kinds of things that I think leaders need to talk about all the time, and they come up when we do coaching packages, big coaching packages, and you have the luck of being with a coach at the time that comes up, you have a resource for that. But you know, most of us, most of our career are not in a coaching package. That's 6 months to a year of our career. We're not necessarily on a call with a coach or in a class. And so one of the things that I started doing is I started deciding that a lot of the work I want to do is to be available more in the moment for people and helping them in the messy middle. And that comes down to like how I think leaders need support, and the way they need support is they don't need more big programs or huge coaching packages or things that are super expensive or mandates to tell people what to do. I think they need a new toolkit. And I think they need a community practice that they can be in all the time. And that's why I started my online community for leaders, because I feel like people can get something that only takes a few minutes a week, where they're getting a play of the week and they're getting, you know, monthly discussions and meetups with each other and posts and tools throughout the month that they can go into the community at any time and say, hey, got this problem, right? Just like Latasha just did. And then we go after it and we bring it back to the principles that we're talking about in the community, which are about how do we have an aligned conversation from our heart and our head and the measurement and the culture, and how do we look at it all rather than doing some reaction stuff? What else do you think? You could ask questions about what I just said, or throw in what you think people need. I would love to hear.
Personally, I'm getting ready to have to jump here, but I really appreciate this opportunity to get on and hear from leaders. And Letitia, I'm sorry for the struggle that you're going through. I think that it's not unique in our marketplace these days. There is a really great book, if you've never read it, that hits on Stacey, what Stacey was talking about earlier about leading up, or the art of leading up, and it's called Throwing an Elephant. And at this point, it's old, but it's fun and funny, and it really does give you some ideas about how to lead up the chain of command, if you will. It's called Throwing an Elephant. I don't remember the author. Zen and the Art of Leading Up, and it'll teach you a lot about doing that. It was a great recommendation given to me. a couple years ago, and it's a fun read. I mean, if you don't read it all in one sitting, I'll be surprised. It's that good.
Wow.
I've got to go, but thanks for having me today. I hope you'll have a wonderful day.
Thanks for joining, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
What else are you thinking or wondering about, Scott and Latasha?
Yeah, I guess the thing that keeps on going back to my mind is there's a lot of people that are looking for. There's a lot of people that are looking to drive towards the culture and environment and stuff that was pre-pandemic. And we talked about the toothpaste back in the tube. They may just be driving towards the same thing. Maybe we never get back to that. And it's just a new normal.
It's
So,
new normal, it's new tools, it's new
Yeah.
ways of thinking and new offers. It totally is. I'm with you. You know, I want to make an invitation to you both that, I would love to have a call with you and talk more about what's going on in your world and how I can support you. If you're interested in the community, it is a phenomenal place to play and to bring some of these issues and get a different perspective at it. And so, Money, if you want to go to the offer, I'm putting out on my fall special. It's not even online yet, you guys. Like, it's just going live today. But I'm going to bring my annual membership down and offer the coupon code, and I'll offer it to you both. Fall 1999, because that's the price for the year. Can you even imagine the worth of that compared to what you get out of a class if you could have discussions like this, all throughout the month? It's a lot of fun. And if you want to take a tour, just email me and we'll hop on and we'll look at the community together. And I'm more than happy to talk more about what some of the things are in your world that you're wrestling with around leadership and this whole hybrid remote thing. Being a leader in our reality today is hard. Latasha, any parting questions or thoughts?
No, thank you though for the code and for all of the information that you provided today.
You bet. And again, if you want this list of 10 engaging practices, let me know and I'll send that to you as well. I love what you all do, and I'm here to support you. But more than that, I think I'm really looking to be a voice in this industry, to start pulling us out of this binary, looking at things as a one size fit all, and really making it affordable and possible to lift up our leaders, because they're amazing. You're amazing. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stacey.
You bet. Glad to see you.
Good to see you, Leah.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks all.